Thank you for joining me today on Paint a Beautiful Picture. Yesterday, we talked about helping your child to understand emotional responsibility. Today, we're going to talk about teaching your child to understand the difference between influence and control. And honestly, it's about us as parents understanding the difference as well. All of us understand what it's like when we have someone who has I guess I'm going to say a self-centered intention toward us. And that is they want to be manipulative, they want to be controlling. Sometimes they even are physically or verbally abusive to try to coerce us into doing what they would like us to do. And every single one of us knows that isn't a good person. It isn't a good person for us to associate with. It certainly isn't a person that we want to allow deeply into our personal space. And so, even as adults, we get this. We don't need someone to control us. We need to take personal control and responsibility of ourselves and of our lives. What does that look like for you as a parent? To be able to show your child the difference between influence and control. When they're very small, I mean, an infant till it really does depend on the child. I'm going to say 1.5 to 2 years old. They don't have much control. They don't have control over their bladder. They don't have control over their bowels. They don't have control over their emotions. They just don't have any control. So you need to acknowledge as a parent, my kid is going to be out of control for a couple of years. And so I have to have self control in handling my frustrations and my expectations. And then I have to have control. In other words, I'm going to control when they go to bed, and I'm going to control when they get out of bed, and I'm going to control when they eat. And basically, I'm the person who has control. I don't mean you're controlling, but that you have control. And with that control comes responsibility. So when it comes to the intentionality of parenting, you say to yourself, I have control and I have the responsibility that goes with that. So if your child doesn't get enough sleep and they're always cranky and they're always whiny and they're always difficult to handle, that's within your control. You need to put them to bed earlier. You need to establish a bedtime routine so they can sleep. If they have an ear infection, if they have a perpetually runny nose, if they always have a cold and they're coughing, you have the control of taking them to the doctor, seeing that they receive the proper medical care, finding out a decent diagnosis, especially if they have an ear infection. Both of mine had perpetual ear infections, it seemed like, spent most of their early years going back and forth to the ENT. And finally, both of them ended up getting tubes in their ears. My one son had his tonsils and his adenoids out. My other son didn't. But you are responsible and you have control over when they go to the doctor. And if that doctor doesn't find out what's really going on, you take them to another one. In other words, you do have a lot of control. But once the child gets a little bit older, now granted, he can't call the doc and take himself, but he learns to have a certain amount of control over his personal emotional state. He has control over his space in that he has to pick up his toys and he has to help in the house. All of those things. We're going to talk about that in just a minute, just so you know. Those things come under your influence. You influence that child by teaching them. You influence that child by example. You influence that child with discipline. You influence that child with rewards. You have the opportunity to influence your child in the things that are forming and shaping his behavior and his character. All right, so they're 3 years old. What is a realistic expectation of that child in his own personal control? I want you to know, as I've told you before, that I taught K3 preschoolers. In the private school where I taught, those kids knew to pick up everything when they finished playing with it, which they were capable of. Getting their own mat down from their cubby and lying it down in the correct place so they could take their nap, and they were capable of doing that. Of going to the bathroom on their own and making sure they were clean, and if they had an accident, changing their own clothing. They were capable of doing all of that. So let me tell you realistically, if you have, we'll say, 3 children, and one of them is a 3-year-old, you can expect that 3-year-old, when they're finished with their toys, to put them all back. Some 2-year-olds can do it, depending on the child. You can expect that they are going to take off their own clothes and put them where they belong, in a clothes hamper, in a clothes basket, wherever that spot is. You can expect in the morning that they get dressed. Often, what I would do with my kids is I would lay out 3 outfits, and they could choose what they were going to wear. So rather than having this battle about what are you going to wear today, there were 3 things already right there, and they were going to wear one of those things. And I didn't put things out that they hated. And if I saw something that they just refused to wear over and over and over, rather than controlling their lives, saying, I spent good hard money for this and you're going to wear it, I would gently exert influence and say, I think that shirt looks really cute on you, but I hate it. Great. I got rid of the outfit. What's the point of fighting about something over and over? So you influence your child, but you don't have to control them. They have a mind, they have their own thoughts, they have their own ideas, they have their own preferences. Let them have control where they can. You're empowering that child. You're enabling them to learn how to make decisions, and you're definitely teaching them the sense of responsibility about things I can do and things I can do well, and they feel good about themselves. So they pick up their toys when they're done, they choose the clothes that they're going to wear, they make their bed. They may not make that bed to your standards, but I'm telling you, even at 3, they can get up there and put their pillow in the right place, and whatever your terms are, put their pajamas under their pillow or in the drawer and pull up the sheets. They can do all of those things. So you're influencing them to learn how to be a responsible person, and they feel really good about that. All right. Now, here's the rest of the story when you start getting an older child, especially if you have a child that you haven't trained well. And, it's okay. Don't feel guilty about that. Today is a new day. Start now. Or if you have a foster child who nobody's trained, no one's taught, no one's helped, and they really need your help, and you want to help them. And so you can influence them a great deal, but don't try to exert too much control. Their life is already out of control enough. And even your own children, when you institute a new process of parenting or you're establishing new guidelines, they feel out of control too. And so by demonstrating to them how important they are to you, by showing them affection, by showing them structure and kindness, you're influencing them. This is a safe place. This environment is okay. And we are all going to be all right in it. All right, so you have a foster child, or you have your own child who's kind of out of control, and you're trying to bring things to another place. Again, as we talked about yesterday, you can acknowledge this is really challenging, isn't it? It's even challenging for me. I've been kind of laid back about this whole thing, and suddenly I think that I need to do things a little bit differently, or we need to do things a little bit differently. It's kind of hard, isn't it? You can acknowledge that to your child. You can allow them to acknowledge that to you. Yeah, I hate it. I thought everything was fine before. Especially if they were running wild out of control. Of course, they thought everything was fine before. They don't want you putting the brakes on it and trying to give them structure. I mean, that's not going to be a quick or an easy transition. But just acknowledging that this is kind of hard. It's pretty challenging, isn't it? And then say to them, but I'm so committed to you, and I'm going to take good care of you. And this is part of that process of me taking care of you. Just hearing those words is an influence on your child's response to what's going on. So, say bedtime, which is very often a huge deal in many households, is a particularly difficult thing. And you say to them, 1 hour before you go to bed, you cannot have any electronics. Let me tell you, a parent who's used to putting a kid on the couch in front of a TV set with a movie going, and the kid just eventually is so tired he falls asleep and you carry him into the bed, the parent is liable to have as much or more of a hard time as the kid. Just want you to know this. Yet it is a demonstrated fact that when children have all these moving objects before their eyes, whether it's on a phone or an iPad or a TV set, their mind and their body does not rest the same. So 1 hour before bedtime, everything goes off. They can take a bath, you can read a story, you can sing, but there is no other noise. And you're influencing them to take good care of themselves, to facilitate a good night's sleep and meaningful rest. So you have a foster child, you can expect a week or two of real rebellion about this, and perhaps even with your own, if this has been their entire whole life and they're learning something different. But your sense of influence over them is you turn it off. You learn how to quiet your mind. And in the morning, when everyone wakes up well rested and much better prepared to face the day, and all of you reap the benefits of it, and maybe you even do better at work and you're more alert and you're more productive, you will see the advantage of that and your capacity to even say that to your child. Wow, I've been sleeping better. I feel better. I notice that you're doing better. Your attitude is better. You've been so much more cooperative with me. I think this has been a good change for us. That influences a child to understand that sometimes we need to make significant changes. When we get new information, when we understand things differently, we might actually make changes that are very beneficial to all of us. I'm going to tell you another area of influence that you have, and that is mealtime. And I know we've talked about it a little, but I really want you to know that studies show that a family who sits down to a meal together and has conversation, again, you're going to set your phone aside or literally turn the thing off and put it on a kitchen counter. Maybe everybody in the house who's been hooked up that afternoon puts it all on the kitchen counter and the TV is off, and you're actually talking to one another, and you're influencing your child to A, appreciate the meal, B, appreciate the conversation, and C, make a change that initially may be uncomfortable, but in the long run is helpful to the entire family. Studies show that in families where children gather and eat a meal with their parent or parents are less likely to get into trouble. I do mean long term, like certain kinds of juvenile delinquency, are far more likely to do better in school, and are much better at socialization skills. It's a simple thing to do, but it really has a big influence on the way that your child's life will be, not just for that week, but long term. All right, one more area that I wanted to talk to you about. You have this child, he's frequently angry, he's kind of fighting with you, he's real adversarial, he's grumpy, and they might be in the midst of all of this change. One of the ways that you can influence is, instead of yelling or screaming or whatever, to go to them and literally put your hands on them in whatever way works for you. Okay? So you might put their hands gently on the side of their face, or you might lay it on their head, or you might put it along their shoulders, or you might literally physically pick the child up and just hug them for a few minutes or touch them a minute and look right into their eyes and meaningfully say to them, I really understand that this has been difficult for you. I get it that you seem to be frustrated. I understand that you're angry. But you know what? That's okay. I'm not afraid of or worried about your emotions right now. I think that your emotions are really normal. I love you. I care about you. I'm concerned about you. And we are going to get through this together. Do you know that can happen when an animal dies? Everything in your house has been great, but a strange event happens and it throws your kid off emotionally. You can influence them because you're teaching them that we're going to get through this. And when we do it together, when you do it with someone alongside of you who loves you, who's committed to you, who cares about you, you can get through anything. even the really hard stuff. With a teenager, sometimes we want to kick back into the control place as a parent. Like, pick up your room. I told you. You're not going out with those kids. I don't even like those kids. I told you. Do you know by the time a kid is 13 or 14 years old and he has a certain measure of independence, you can talk all day long. They might even look or act like they're doing the right thing. But they walk out that door, and honey, a whole nother thing is happening. Don't kid yourself. I've counseled too many hundreds of people not to know that. What you have to do then is exert influence, not control. And you say to them, is all your homework done? Because if it isn't, you can't go out. Is your room picked up? Because if it isn't, you can't go out. Have you done your chores in the house? Have you done the dishes? Have you taken out the trash? Have you swept the floor? Well, I'm really sorry, you can't go out. You can expect that same kind of frustrated and angry response, and you can do the same thing. You can touch them. They might pull away or flinch. It doesn't matter. You can at least put a hand on their shoulder and say to them, you know, I do care about you. I really love you. I'm vitally committed to you and your life and what's good for you. And we're going to get through this together. So reassure your child, influence your child, do everything in your power you can to help your child feel safe. But when they don't need your control any longer, pull it back and just exert your influence. My challenge for you today, what I would like you to write into your notebook is, am I good at exerting influence in my child's life? And are there things I'm trying to control that I need to let go of? Again, this is one of those areas I'd encourage you to leave 6 to 8 inches on your paper. Over the next few days, notice, where am I trying to take control? And where do I need to exert influence? I hope you have a really great day with your children today. I will see you soon. You may find additional information on our paintabeautifulpicture.com website. Additionally, you may watch me on Rumble, and you may also listen to a podcast on Buzzsprout or Spreaker, all under the name Paint a Beautiful Picture. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. You may subscribe, and if you are interested in receiving notifications, please hit the notifications button.